attempted second-degree murder, first-degree assault, use of a handgun in a crime of violence, and reckless endangerment. Most of the charges relate to Mr. John Slaughter, who is the victim in this case. The reckless endangerment charge relates to other passengers that were on the train where the shooting took place. This matter took place on December the 15th, 2020 at approximately 6:45 a.m. in the morning. The facts that I'm reciting at this point in time were read in open court by Mr. Hill, and therefore I am quoting from what is already in the public record. Emergency Communications Center for Montgomery County received a call that a passenger on a Red Line Metro train near the medical center station indicated that there had just been a shooting on the train. Investigators from the Washington Metro Transit Area Police, and they are the lead investigative agency in this matter, responded to the medical center station. This is between Grosvenor and Medical Center. While in transport between those two stations, that's when the shooting took place. The defendant, Mr. Valdivia, was riding to work on the Red Line train. The victim, Mr. Stephen Slaughter, entered the train at the Grosvenor station at approximately 6:35. As was mentioned in court, there was a brief exchange between the two where Mr. Slaughter asked for or demanded money from Mr. Valdivia. They separated when there was a fist pump between the two of them, and they went their separate ways. After they separated and began to walk down the aisle away from the defendant in this case, the victim in this matter used some expletives. There were words spoken by Mr. Valdivia about him not continuing to use the expletives. Mr. Slaughter turned and reapproached Mr. Valdivia, the shooter, for the second time. It was during that second time that they came together, and it was described in open court. They were basically within arm's length of each other. The victim in this case, Mr. Slaughter, was not armed. There never was any blows exchanged between the two of them. There were words exchanged between both, and at some point in time, the agent withdrew his weapon from his holster, and the victim was in fact shot. Immediately after shooting the defendant, and the defendant did instruct and identify himself as a member of the FBI. Calls were made for medical people to respond to the next stop, and the officer did assist medical personnel in getting the victim off of the train where he received medical attention. In today's hearing, after hearing the facts that were read in court, the defendant was released on an unsecured personal bond. He did agree to turn over all weapons he possessed, including a service revolver and his passport. He was ordered not to have any contact or have any attempt to contact Mr. Slaughter, the victim in the case. At this point in time, we are waiting. There was a date that was mentioned in court, and that is a scheduling hearing in this matter on June the 11th. At the time of the scheduling hearing, the trial date and the motions dates will be set. But as of this point in time, all we have is the one control date of June 11th. The other dates will come. It's a rather informal hearing. It's very brief, but it'll be before the trial and judge who gets assigned this matter, and that'll take place in about 11 days.
Mr. Bonsiv said, of course, I think your attorney addressed it, that the agent repeatedly warned Mr. Slaughter to back up, and that that's one thing that I would like you to address. And the other thing is that Mr. Bonsiv has outlined a long history of problems with this victim.
Let me say, in terms of what the actual verbal exchange was at the time of the shooting, I'm going to defer to that being developed actually in court itself. I'm not going to speculate as to what the evidence is going to ultimately prove to be. I did hear what Mr. Bonsiv said earlier, and I've known Mr. Bonsiv for a long time. I respect him as an attorney, so I'm not going to get into that. We'll let it be resolved in open court. In terms of Mr. Slaughter's record, we were aware of him having had contacts before, but again, as was pointed out by the question was asked by the judge herself in open court, the defendant didn't know any of those things when this happened. So again, that will resolve itself after this is over, and I think this will be a complex matter to be tried. The judge will give the appropriate instructions, and the lawyers will argue their case. But again, we were aware of anything that Mr. Bonson said. We were aware of what he was talking about.
Explain why your office decided this shooting was not justified. Can you explain?
Well, look, I'm not in reference. You would never charge a case if you thought that it was justified, because a justified shooting is protected by law. So again, once the facts and the investigation, look, this didn't happen overnight. We've been looking at this, reviewing this matter, gathering information for 5 or 6 months in this case. So there's a 5 or 6 month investigation that went into us, reviewing the facts, waiting for us to gather stuff. You're asking me to give the closing argument now, and I'm not going to do that.
Stephanie with Foxconn.
I mean, it's a similar question, but in the packet that the attorney gave, it says one does not need to wait until the threat has hands on you before they're authorized to defend.
I think what you're reading from is from FBI manuals.
Well, my
Right.
question to you, I mean, this is what the attorney is giving us in the
Right.
this client.
Right.
You sort of answered here, but what is your message to the community on your thoughts on whether this is justified?
Well, my personal opinion is not what this press conference is about. Let me say, the jury or a judge will decide when this matter is tried whether or not it was justified or not. We would not have brought the charge if we thought that it was protected by law. So by virtue of bringing forth the charge, we've made a judgment that a crime occurred.
Can you explain why you believe that it was not protected?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I'm going to decline that very gracious offer because I think that to explain all of the reasons why we came to this conclusion would be effectively for me to give you a closing argument as to a 5-month investigation. This is not the appropriate time to do
Can you
that.
go back to what?
How difficult is it to prove that an action is not reasonable?
Well, I think, without talking about this case, I think that kind of analysis occurs all the time. I mean, there are plenty of times that you could have a fight that takes, you and I could be in a bar with each other, and all of a sudden we have an exchange between the two of us, and one uses a weapon or hits another person. We have to sort these kinds of things out all the time. Whether or not self-defense, which is, I guess, what we're really talking about here, always is based on a totality of the circumstances and facts in an individual case. And so, we make that kind of analysis all the time, whether it's a bar fight or a shooting on a train. This is not a unique kind of analysis for us. We do that all the time.
Megan Cloherty.
Given the nature of the offense, can you explain if the agent's job had anything to do with the terms of the bond? For example, if somebody else had fired those shots who was not an FBI agent, would they be released on their own personal recognizance, or would you have suggested that would be a possibility?
Well, look, I think, Joanne Ryan is a superb judge. I was there. I've got to tell you, I'm not here to tell you that I was surprised that he got released. He has no record. He has apparently a stellar career as an FBI agent, and there was this happened 6 months ago. He's been free in the community. He hasn't fled anywhere. He's continued to be here. I think you're talking about risk of flight and danger. There is no other pattern of violence, and there doesn't appear. He didn't appear. I don't think there was anything that would suggest he was about to run away. So again, I'm not surprised by I respect entirely what the judge did today. Quite candidly, I anticipated she was going to do that.
Can we go
Michael
back to what?
Kunkel, AP.
I know your office was aware of the victim's alleged history, criminal record. Was that a factor at all, or did you take it into account?
Absolutely. Look, as part of any case, you look at everything. And so would we look at that? Sure, we would look at that. But again, primarily we're looking at what actually happened.
Stephanie got started on this, and I just want to continue about duty to retreat. Did he have a duty to retreat?
Well, let me say to the duty, there is a very extensive law on the duty. It's a very sophisticated question, actually. There is a duty to retreat generally in Maryland before you use lethal force if there is an avenue of retreat. Now, quite candidly, I know Mr. Bonsips is a fine lawyer. There's going to be some argument about whether that avenue of retreat was available to him. So, again, it depends upon the facts, whether or not an avenue of retreat was available to somebody and whether he knew it was available to him. So I am aware of the law. It's a very sophisticated argument. It turns on the facts in an individual case. And I'm not going to opine about this case.
All right, Amy Cho, NBC4.
Thank you. Why did it take so long to bring the charges in this case?
We were trying to be thorough. We were trying to be fair. And we were actually trying to gather background on the agent and background on Mr. Slaughter. We were trying to get information, and sometimes getting hold of some of that information took time sometimes.
Daniel Shear, because the Beat.
Can you respond specifically to what Mr. Bonsipp had said in his statement about being concerned that Mr. Slaughter would get access to Mr. Valdivia's firearm?
I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to respond. Again, I have great respect for Mr. Bonsipp. I'm not going to respond to his specific comment.
Back to AP.
Are you
Mike.
aware of any use of force incidents prior to this confrontation involving the agent on or off duty?
Those are among the things that we looked into, and I'm not here suggesting that we found any, but somebody asked, why did the investigations take too long? Those are among the things you want to look at. He's worked in various locations. Those would be reasonable things anybody, I think, would want to look at, and we did.
Okay, folks, a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Stephanie.
At the time of this shooting, there were concerns raised by many community members, even a Congress member, about lack of transparency coming from federal agencies. Did you run into that trying to gather information?
I will reserve my comment on that until after this matter is over.
Daniel, one more.
It was mentioned that Mr. Valdivia did not identify himself as an FBI agent until after this occurred, but I know that in the 911 call, the gentleman who witnessed this had said that Mr. Valdivia remarked back up on the agent. Can you explain which is true? Is that not true what you said?
I don't. That's not correct. I think the facts assumed in your question are not accurate.
Okay, folks, we appreciate you today. Anybody need copies of the indictment? We have it here. This is actually the unsigned version. If you need the signed version, you can go to the clerk's office and get it yourself. But this does have the criminal complaint number as well as the warning about indictments not being actual guilt finding.
He actually entered a plea. I didn't hear a plea being entered. It's in his brain, right?
I guess I'm assuming that a former. I don't know if I don't know that it ever formally was entered, but I'm sure it was docketed as a not guilty or not.
Okay, because I didn't hear an arraignment. I just heard the bond review.
I don't remember that being said either.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks to our law clerks and interns for holding your times up. Appreciate you guys. Anybody else?
Mr. Hill, off the record, did he enter a plea? Because I don't spend enough
I
time.
didn't hear one, but I assume if it wasn't today, it will be entered on the 11th.
Thank you. Okay. Dale, really